RBI is going to be paying up 28,000 crore rupees as interim dividend to the government. This, I think, seems to be bang in line with what the government was in fact even asking for that matter. 28,000 crore rupee interim dividend. This is what the government seemed to be asking for, and this is what, at least at this point of time, we seem to be picking up from agencies. Remember that if in case the RBI does agree to pay 20,000 crores, the total surplus transfer to the government in the current fiscal would total 68,000 crore rupees. This, of course, is RBI Governor Shakti Kanta Das's this decision, 28,000 crore rupees. At least at this point of time, we are only picking it up from agencies. There's no, we do not have any independently verified reports, but 28,000 crore rupees is what has been decided. In fact, just about earlier, we had Finance Minister Arun Jaitley saying that the RBI only takes an independent decision on the interim dividend. The quantum of the interim dividend to be paid to the centre has been decided, 28,000 crore rupees. Supriya Srinath is standing by. Supriya, I think this is more or less in line with what the government as well wanted.
Yes, it may be in line with what the government has wanted, but it's a lot higher than what the RBI had paid last year, and which is why it's important to put it in perspective. This is going to really help the government in terms of meeting its fiscal deficit targets. It does give government some more elbow room in terms of getting more money for more schemes. Okay, the RBI press release is out, so give me a minute, and it does say that the board has... can someone please put ET now right in front of me so that I can see the flashes as they're coming in? It does very categorically say that for the half year ended, based on the limited audit review and after replying to the extent capital framework, the board decided to transfer an interim surplus of 28,000 crore rupees. So that's obviously higher. I think other than that, there is no special announcement. Okay, so the big news is, yes, 28. I've got Mr. R. Gandhi joining us on the phone line. And Mr. Gandhi, thank you very much for being with us. This is an interim surplus of 28,000 crore rupees. This is a lot higher than what the RBI has paid before, is it not?
Interim dividends, obviously, it is halfway through. You have to wait for the final year to close, and based on which only the total dividends can be thought of. So with the total dividends which Reserve Bank would be passing on to government, that depends upon the total income that Reserve Bank gets out of its various investments. So we need to see whether this is the highest or this is the lowest. That we have to wait for the year to be out.
No, absolutely. We'll have to see how much will the total dividend be, and only then can we say that the interim dividend is higher. You rightly point that out. I think stay with us on the phone line. I've also got Dr. Pranab Sen joining us on ET Now, and thank you very much, Dr. Sen, for being with us. 28,000 crore rupees. Prima facie, this is an interim dividend. This isn't the final number. The final number usually comes in July. For the time being, this does give government some elbow room, some amount of comfort as far as the fiscal position is concerned.
Well, not a whole lot. I mean, it's reassuring to see that the dividend number is a one. So clearly the interim dividend is not being used to actually take more than would be justified, because interim dividends cannot actually, or should not actually exceed what the final dividend would be. And 28,000 crores is a very, very reasonable figure. So I think it's a very reassuring number that's been projected.
No, absolutely. And I think that also tells us what a dialogue between the monetary and the fiscal authority can do. Remember, there were all kinds of astronomical numbers being put out there. In fact, some people are putting out the interim dividend itself to be around 60,000 crore rupees. It's not an astronomical number. It's higher than what has come in previously as part of interim dividend. But this is not the final figure. It has to be put in perspective that government has received higher dividend from the RBI previously, and this is just interim, and this is season final. I've also got H.R. Khan, former Deputy Governor at the RBI, joining us on the phone line. 28,000 crore rupees looks like it's reasonable and looks like it has come after some sort of a dialogue between the monetary and the fiscal authority. This is no coercion, as a lot of people would have assuaged. The board has taken a call. It's not a very high or an astronomical number that some people were fearing. On that count, how would you react to 28,000 crore rupees? Will you, however, raise eyebrows on this being interim and not a final dividend that should have come in July?
No, this follows the pattern which was set last year. Last year also some interim dividend was paid, which was adjusted from the final dividend paid after the annual accounts were closed on 30th June, which was paid in August. So this is following that pattern. And I believe the RBI has now started a system of half-yearly closing of its account. And I believe it must have been audited and accounts must have been audited. And they would have arrived at a half-yearly surplus figure, so that they would have provided to the government what they have done last year. So I believe this is coming out of realized income. So there is technically no problem as long as it doesn't go out of unrealized income. This should be okay. But what will be of most interest is what is the formula which will be coming out of Jalan Committee, which is discussing about the modalities of of more interest. But this is just, as I said, following the pattern last year. And they have done half-yearly closing of accounts. And they must have arrived at this surplus. That is why this interim dividend to be adjusted against the final figure to be released in August.
No, I agree with you there. And I think it's also important to point out here that with this 28,000 crore coming in as interim dividend, the total surplus transfer to the government in the current financial year would total about 68,000 crore rupees, and that is a reasonable amount of money that is with the government. It's the second successive year when an interim dividend has been transferred. Dr. Sen, very quickly, Pranab Sen is still with us on the phone line. 68,000 crore rupees is what it totals to as far as the surplus transfer to the government is concerned in this current financial year, because a part of the previous dividend had come in this financial year in about July sometime. And perhaps more is going to come in the next financial year. But given that 68,000 crore surplus is with the government, given this is the second successive year of interim dividend transfer, this should be a more comfortable position. Because the fiscal year 19 budgeted target of RBI surplus was 54,817 crore rupees. It totals to about 68,000 now, which of course is a lot over 54,000.
That is true, but you know, a lot of the budgeted numbers really depends upon the kind of estimates that are made regarding the expenses of the RBI. You know, and one really doesn't have a feel for that. So I'm sure they've looked at what the half-yearly figures have been, because, you know, as I said, you know, 28,000 is not an alarming amount. So, and since the 68,000 is really a full adjustment of the previous, of last year's dividend, that's fine. So long as the 28,000 is less than half of what was paid out, which is 68,000 crores, roughly 64,000 crores, I think. I think we're okay.
Right. Fair point. But if I do have Mr. H.R. Khan or Mr. R. Gandhi with us, I would like to go and get a quick clarification before I come back to Pranab Sen. Okay, I don't. Dr. Sen, however, I have one quick question to ask of you. You know, from a semantics, from an optics point of view, there was a lot of bad blood between the RBI on one hand, all kinds of conjecturing of how the government was quote-unquote raiding the reserves of the RBI. All of those concerns and fears, do you believe, have been put to rest? This is the more mature dialogue that's happening. You've got somebody who's now on Mint Street, somebody who's opened the channels of communication, the government willing to perhaps back off a little and also doing a conversation. And in that sense, is this, you know, have saner times returned to the monetary and a fiscal dialogue?
Oh, absolutely. There's no question about it. What we witnessed in the last year was I think, excessive face-off between two authorities which should be working very closely in sync. And that, I think, was more worrying than actually the substance of the difference. It was at a differential acrimony levels that were on display. So this is very much more reassuring. And the market should feel a lot better about it.
No, absolutely, the market should feel better, and this does also, this also does dispute the theory that the RBI's reserves are to be raided and the government was doing all of that. And now that, the modalities of the budget are out and what the government intends to do, perhaps those fears have been further put to rest. But prima facie, what is your take on this whole interim dividend practice? Why shouldn't dividend, like it was previously done, not be transferred once and for all when the final books close? Is this basically comforting the centre's fisc, Dr. Sen?
Yes, it is. I mean, what puzzles me, of course, is to think that, the view that something has been happening in the past is the right way of doing things. I mean, when companies declare interim dividends, which they do quite often, nobody raises an eyebrow. Why should it be the case that eyebrows are being raised in this particular instance? So I don't get that, and I find nothing inherently wrong with it. And, I think we should simply accept that, yes, that there are times when the government does need to give itself a little bit of elbow room as far as the fisc is concerned. And this is one way of doing so.
No, fair point indeed. This is one way of doing so, and you're right. Why should eyebrows be raised when it's the RBI transferring reserves, when it doesn't happen as far as the private sector is concerned? But very quickly, sir, one of the things that I'd also want to talk to you about is the fact that this is a decision of the board, so this isn't discretionary. It's not the government coaxing the RBI. But what does this mean, if you may understand, for the benefit of our viewers, if you may explain, what will this mean for fiscal math? Does this move the needle at all, this interim dividend? Because obviously the government's books have still not closed. Do you believe fiscal deficit could be a little better than what one had envisaged than what was said in the budget?
Not really. Not really. It's a part of the whole sort of fiscal optics, as it were. Because, this is the sort of thing that the finance ministry does all the time in terms of, postponing payouts for various public expenditures, and pushing it into next year's budget. That's all that's being done. You're just transferring a payment from one particular year to the previous year. All that's being done. So yes, it changes the optics, but it doesn't change anything in substance.
So it doesn't change anything in substance other than the changing the optics. Are you at all of the camp that will point us in the direction that because there's a new governor now, an interim dividend has come in? Or will you point us in the direction that an interim dividend came in even under Governor Patel, and it's not as if this makes the governor or the RBI board or the monetary authority look any pliable, quote unquote? Because that is one fear. I'm just voicing a concern that has been said on the street before.
Frankly, I don't think it's a reflection of that. It's had the interim dividend is a sign of a pliable RBI. I think this sort of a thing is a sign of a pragmatic RBI. Look, at the end of the day, the government is the owner, and the owner should be deciding what the pattern of payout of earnings are. And this is completely legitimate, and I think the RBI is being very pragmatic about it. Yes, if the demand had been exorbitant, and so instead of talking about 28,000 crores, let's say we are talking about 50,000 crores. And then if the RBI had agreed to it, then one would have, I think, rights to raise eyebrows. But with this figure, I don't think there's any cause to do so.
But if I may ask you, what do you believe made the government change its position? Do you believe it's the position has been changed in view of the criticism that came in interfering with RBI's autonomy, in interfering with RBI's independence, or quote-unquote allegations of raiding reserves? Do you believe there was a demand for higher dividend and that has now been toned down? I know I'm making you speculate, but if you can do some intelligent speculation for us, it will be great, sir.
You know, what had been happening earlier was really a war of words going on, where I think even the government was putting in place demands which were unreasonable, and I think the government knew it. I don't think that they were not aware of it, but then when you're in a war of words, you tend to overplay your positions. So I think what has happened is the heat has come down a lot, and on both sides of the table there's sanity.
No, absolutely, and we love sanity as much as the markets do. Just hold your thoughts right now, sir. I've got Maithili Basnoor also joining us on the phone line. And Maithili, 28,000 crore rupees presto is what the RBI is going to pay the government as interim dividend. Now remember, 28,000 crore rupees is also exactly the figure that the government had wanted. So your quick takes, are you going to read between the lines? Is there more fine print that's meeting your eye than ours?
Well, this is a number that Mr. Garg had given us soon after the budget. So clearly the RBI has signed on the dotted line. The RBI board has kind of signed on the dotted line and given the government exactly what it was seeking. So I would think that there was some agreement well at the time of framing the budget numbers itself. So no surprises there. That clearly the RBI is willing to pitch in and help the government reach its budget deficit. So as long as the government uses this productively for investment, I have no quarrel with it really, except that it sets a little bit of a bad precedent in the sense that you're always taking your money ahead of when it was due, because this would technically have come only next fiscal. So to that extent, yes, the government is perhaps living a little bit beyond its means, but provided it spends it wisely, I really do not have too much of an issue with it.
Dr. Sen, do you believe in some sense this is also the government living beyond its means? And the question about how it's going to be invested needs to be also very, very keenly watched?
No, look, the government in any case was living beyond its means, right? So instead of announcing a 3.4% fiscal deficit, they could have simply announced 3.5%. Right? It wouldn't have made any difference to anybody's life, except the optics. Now, the whole question is that as the market, do you get more worried about a high fiscal deficit ratio, or do you get more worried about an interim dividend payout? That's the call that's being taken. In terms of anything that has to do with real life, it makes no difference whatsoever.
Yeah, that's true. It makes no difference. But Maithili, the other question also is that how much is this going to help the government in terms of its deficit? A, the government had lower tax collections, couldn't meet its tax targets. And the other part is that the divestment targets could not be met. And the total amount now from, the second tranche that came in this fiscal from the RBI and now this interim dividend adds up to about 68,000 crore rupees. Does this significantly plug the budget deficit? Maithili? Maithili? Okay, I don't think Maithili is with us. Is Maithili Basnoor with us on the phone line? Okay, we seem to have lost her feed. I will stick with Dr. Pranab Sen. And Dr. Sen, exactly the same question to you. I know it doesn't change, it doesn't move the needle too much, but because the indirect tax collections were not met and because divestment was also short of target, do you believe this does plug the deficit to a great extent?
Not to a great extent, to a very small extent, in fact. If you think about it, quite reasonably, I think the government could have expected around 60,000 crores. in total. Instead of that, they've got 68,000. Now, in a situation of this kind, it does plug a little bit of the hole, but the missing the disinvestment target number is much, much larger. So all that's happening is that you're really looking at what is a fiscal deficit target number that the government can live with.
Absolutely. What's the fiscal deficit number that the government can live with? And at least in the budget, they told us that we'll have to live with a number marginally higher than 3.3, which is 3.4%. Give me a minute. I've also got Shagatu Bhattacharya joining us on the phone line, and Maithili Bhusnurmat is back as well. 28,000 crore rupees interim dividend. How comforting is that going to be? And for monetary hawks out there, is this a number that monetary watchers and stakeholders can live with? Okay, I think I've got Maithili there with me. Shagatu's line has been disconnected. Maithili, if you can take up that question, is 28,000 a number one can live with? And Dr. Pranab Sen has emphatically stated it's not going to move the needle too much on the budget deficit. What's your own take there?
Oh, well, absolutely, because this is a number that the government had taken into its calculations while drawing up the interim budget. So there are no surprises. The bond markets were aware that this is the number that the government has factored in. So the 3.4% fiscal deficit is what we get after this 28,000. So no surprises, no changes. Status quo continues as far as the bond market is concerned, really.
No, and also, Maithili, this has been decided after looking into the economic capital framework. If I may just quote a line from there, and very emphatically it states that the area of operations based on a limited audit review and after applying the extant economic capital framework. I'm presuming this has not taken into consideration the Bimal Jalan committee recommendations that have still not come. How significantly can the picture be altered once those recommendations are in as far as this practice of interim transfer is concerned?
Not very significantly, I would expect, because yes, you're right, the panel has yet to submit its recommendations. They're expected only in March. But I do think that most probably what the committee will say is that it will end this practice of interim dividend. And it would say that maybe the transfer should be done only after accounts are audited. Because right now what we have, this is a transfer based on the RBI's first 6 months of operations. Because depending on whatever profits the RBI has got from the period of July to December, that is 6 months of the Reserve Bank of India's operations, this transfer has been affected from the profits made there. So most probably I think the panel would rightly say that the practice of interim dividends is not a very good practice. Let the RBI's accounts be audited, and once and for all there can be a final dividend. Also, I think there is a case for the Reserve Bank of India's financial year, to be coterminous with that of government. Because currently the RBI's year runs from July to June, government's year runs from April to March, and that creates needless complications. So there is a case really for making them both synonymous so that this kind of confusion is avoided.
Okay, making them synonymous. There'll of course be a larger discussion on this at our 7 p.m. show. So come back for that and tune in for this. For now, Dr. Pranab Sen and Maithili Bhusnurmat, thank you very much for joining in.